Good afternoon, Reds. Hope everyone is well. Welcome to Chat UTD. This afternoon, I want to talk about the greatest manager that's ever sat in a dugout, stood on a touchline, or ever given a team talk, Sir Alex Ferguson, or Sir Alexander Chapman Ferguson, to give him his full title. I'm going to start off with the good points. I'm going to bring it back to the current situation, but I'm also going to talk about why his stranglehold of United, as great as it was at the time, has probably proved to be quite troublesome for us in recent years. But let's start on a positive. Sir Alex Ferguson gave me some of my happiest memories because Man United is and always has been a huge part of my life, and he was the architect of everything that happened in the 90s, the noughties, and the early part of the 10s. But particularly my teenage years, where I watched that team, 93, 94, that won the double. For me, still Man United's best team, in my opinion. Obviously a year after winning the first title in 26 years. Going back further, winning the FA Cup, winning the Cup Winners' Cup, just really, really special moments. And then what, obviously, I could sit here forever talking about what he ended up achieving as Man United's manager. My son, whose birthday it is tomorrow, his middle name is Ferguson. My other son, who's 15 months older than him, his middle name is Alexander. So between them, they've got the name. That's how important the man is to me. And when he was ill a few years ago, I wept like it was a member of my family. That's how much he means to me. But such was his influence on Manchester United. I think we became Alex Ferguson Football Club. It was informed by, of course, the past. But in the 40s, 50s and 60s, we were Sir Matt Busby Football Club because Busby built the club. The identity of the club came from Busby. The rebirth after Munich came from Busby and Jimmy Murphy. So those two, but particularly over that 20-year period of time, Busby built the post-war Manchester United. And most clubs don't have singular figures like we've had who've stayed for so long that becomes your identity. In the interim between Sir Matt and Sir Alex, we had ups and downs, and that was all again based on the DNA of Sir Matt Busby. That's why I think a lot of people identified and were attracted to the Doherty team, because it played swashbuckling football. You score 2, we'll score 3. Wingers flying down the wing, getting crosses in, attractive football. I think that's why, and to a point, Big Ron was a little bit like that as well. But we then got this other guy, this powerhouse, who came in and of course took some time, and you could argue in the modern era he probably wouldn't have even lasted to end up doing what he did, because the first 3 years were pretty underwhelming. Luckily he did last, and he built a dynasty, he built a legacy, but it went beyond that because he stayed so long. He became irreplaceable, and also his mark was all over the football club. He ran the club. And at a time when 2013, when social media was starting to play a part, when players were coming in for big money, when really directors of football were becoming popular and chief executives were running clubs, Ferguson delegated more, but ultimately the buck still stopped with him. He was still the main guy. He would still go and look in someone's eyes and sign them or not sign them, given a feeling that he might have. He appointed his successor in David Moyes. Nobody else in football had that influence at that time. The game had moved on, and he had evolved, but his influence was so significant. And he protected us, he shielded us from this modern monster that football's become. We didn't have players joining us because we gave them more money. We didn't have people all over social media and he let them use it. But I think they knew where the line was because they don't want to upset the boss. And I love all that. But the issue was, after 26 years, particularly 20 years of that, he goes. It's a culture built on one man. What do you do when he goes? He's the one that set all the standards. He's the one that sets all the expectations. It's his personality imprinted all over the football club. And this is where the perfect storm comes in. Because not only is he gone, we thought he was protecting us from football and our rivals. It's complex. He's one of the reasons the Glazers are here in the first place. But he also protected us from them because he could do things other people couldn't do. He goes, they step in, their dad dies not long after he left, not long after Fergie left, their dad died, and it's the idiots that are there now. This becomes then this toxic, perfect storm. And we were always going to struggle when he left because it's that one man's legacy. Nobody, you're not going to get anyone, no one can replace him. And I think that was the idea with Moyes, was that I heard it a lot of the time, cut from the same cloth kind of thing. But it doesn't matter if you cut from the same cloth. Nobody is Sir Alex Ferguson. And we've seen what's happened because he's not there to set those standards, because he's not there to set those expectations. We have fallen off a cliff, really, in comparison to where we were. 5 months before he retired, he did an interview on Football Focus, and I think Dan Walker was asking the questions. And at the time, Arsenal hadn't won a Premier League for 8 years, and Arsene Wenger was their manager. And Dan Walker said, "You and Arsene have had your problems in the past. I know you've got a lot of respect for him. What would happen if you had gone 8 years without winning a title?" And he just looked him square in the face and said, "It would never happen here." And even when I'm saying it now, the hairs in the back of my neck are standing up. Because as a fan, you're looking at it thinking, that's our gaffer. He's our, as my mate used to say, he's our invincibility shield. It's emotional. It's emotional talking about it because that's how influential he was. And he's right. It would never happen here while he was the manager. But now we've gone 10 years without winning a title because he's not here anymore. And the Glazers are. You can't cope with the double whammy of having him leave and the Glazers be the owners. If you have him leave and we've got decent owners, we wouldn't be as good, but we wouldn't be the shower we've been over the last 10 years, becoming a laughing stock to everybody else. It run properly. Manchester United, even given the fact that Ferguson has all the influence that I've just spoken about, and I think that actually he was almost too influential because it became Sir Alex Ferguson Football Club. When he leaves, what do you do? What's left? The history of him, the history of Busby, the history of the club. But what do we do now? So that's a problem. But even with all that, if we're run well, given the position he left us in terms of our place in world football, you don't finish outside the top 3 or 4. Struggling is not winning a title for 6 years. Struggling is not competing for a couple of years. Struggling isn't 7th, 6th, 5th, 6th. Not all in succession. We've had seasons where we've been in the top 4. One season in, one season out, one season in, one season out, not making any imprint in the Champions League whatsoever, not even getting close to making an impression on that. Top clubs don't do that, even when they lose a spearhead like Ferguson. Juventus, apart from when they've cheated and they've been found guilty of cheating, never finish outside the top 2 or 3 in Italy without a points deduction. Barcelona, as poor as they've been and as skint as they are, they won the title this year. They never finish outside the top 2 or 3 in Spain. it's come to the point where Atletico Madrid very, very rarely finish outside the top 3 in Spain, and Real Madrid never do. Bayern Munich never outside the top 1, realistically, or certainly outside the top 2. So in all the top countries in the world, the biggest teams, and we are the biggest team in England by a mile, never finish outside those top places. As much as cyclical as football is, they're never too far away. We're light years away because the big man left, the one that was responsible for the club becoming what it was, Sir Alex Ferguson Football Club, and the Glazers are there. Now the problem is, who do you look to? Who you look around the club? Who is running the club now? Unfortunately, it's got their mitts all over it. It's got their prints all over it. So now, very, very unfortunately, and I almost want to throw up in my mouth when I say this, we're now the Glazers FC. Because their influence is far greater than anything Sir Alex Ferguson has left us behind. It's too long ago now. It's a distant memory. It's 10 years. And I think the reason I fell in love with United again for a brief period of time when Solskjaer came, was it was retro. He's not Ferguson, nowhere near, but he brought back some of the same stuff. You saw players suited and booted for an away game looking the part. You saw him say the right things. That was the limit of it. That's why he should have gone at the end of that season. He couldn't do it over a period of time, but at least he tried to kind of bring a bit of that back. And we're all familiar with that, and we're all comfortable with it, and it feels like home because he set that agenda. I always said that the only way we would be successful, and I mean properly successful, winning titles, competing for Champions Leagues year in, year out, the only way we do that while the Glazers are still there is if we stumble across the right manager. Erik Ten Hag is a brilliant manager, but as brilliant as he is, he's not brilliant enough to be able to negate the damage that's been done over a 10-year period by the Glazers, coupled with the fact that our benchmark, as much as I don't like saying it, is a cheat code machine that have been able to doctor their books for 15 years and do what the hell they want. They're a robot, they're a monster, they're horrible. You can't live with that. By the way, this is not me saying I don't think we should have Erik Ten Hag as our manager. Absolutely not. It's not his fault. What I'm saying is I was wrong. I was wrong to think there could be somebody out there who could come and fluke a title, let's say, despite the Glazers. You can't do it. Ferguson was able to do it because he'd already built it up. He was able to do it under the Glazers because he'd had, by that point, 20 years at the club when they took over. Nearly 20 years, 19 years at the club when they took over. So he'd already established that arrogance, that invincibility shield, that we might not be able to sign the best players anymore, but we're Man United. So F you, because we're better than you are. And that just driven determination to win. And he instilled that into people who probably weren't the best football players by that point, but he instilled it into them. He got 5 years extra out of players whose careers probably could have finished in the mid-30s and they finished up nearer 40, in Scholesy and Giggsy. So we already were established as that brute, that behemoth that we'd become. Erik Ten Hag picking up the pieces of a carcass. It's like someone's come and messed up the wiring in your house and an electrician's got to go and sort it all out. He comes and says, who's been at this? That's Erik Ten Hag. And while they're still there, we're going to be hamstrung by them, as we all know that. I'm preaching to the converted, I know that. Bringing it back to Ferguson, problem number one, we became his football club. And then when he leaves, and in his capacity as manager, were not sustainable. Problem number 2, his support of the Glazers. I got emotional before talking about Ferguson saying that it'll never happen under us, when he said that we would never go 8 years without a title, because of the security I felt with him as our manager. But his legacy is tainted, because not only has he not said anything about the Glazers, he's actively supported them, and he professes to want what's best for Man United. Maybe my expectations are too high. There's a lot of people, maybe more stone-faced people, who'd say, "Oh, get a grip of yourself, dickhead. You not see, he's having his palms lined by them." Yeah, I know that, but I expect better than him, better of him than that, because I hold him in such high regard. His continued silence amidst this circus that's going on for the last 9 months is not good enough. He's an old man now, I understand that. But he's watching what he built be destroyed. I don't understand why he'd sit there and not say anything. And he doesn't have to say anything hostile. He could say something along the lines of, even, listen, this isn't my words, I think they've been terrible custodians, but he could say something like, look, they've been good custodians of the football club, but football ownership's moved on. We've seen the amount of money we need now. We've seen the competitors we've now got. Like, we used to just stand out on our own in terms of revenue. We don't anymore. We need a different ownership model. So they've been good for the club, but I think now it's time for them to go. That's all he needs to say. I'm not saying they're then going to go, "Oh yes, Sir Alex, we're going to do what you want." But he is some mythical godlike figure to United fans. And in the world of football, if he speaks, people listen. And that's, for me, would take away some of that tainted feeling that I have regarding his support and silence, not speaking up with the Glazers. The situation is in complete deadlock. Nothing's happening. Simon Stone was on the United stand yesterday, and I read his body language. My job in schools is about communication, verbal and non-verbal. And I read his body language and the tone of voice. Nothing's happening. It's not close. It's not imminent. There's nothing agreed behind the scenes. Not that he knows of, anyway. This is a process that the Glazers are very, very relaxed about. There is no pressure on them. No pressure on them from the authorities. No one looking at the fact that this is quite blatant share price manipulation. The share price was $12 per share in October and November, and it's been consistently nearly double that for 9 months. No one's looking at that. Nobody's questioning them. The bidders don't seem to be pushing them, and the fans are not pushing them hard enough. So we are at complete stalemate, with no communication, deadlines months ago that have passed, and no pressure on them to say, "You said that was a deadline. Why are you not saying anything?" Nothing. It needs a catalyst. The fans aren't going to do anything. They've proved that over the last few months. The authorities aren't going to do anything. So maybe now's the time, Sir Alex, to say something. Because I'm not panicking they're going to stay forever, because I don't think they can, as I've said. But they're going about and they're buying, and again, what are we on Tuesday? We've not signed Onana, we've not signed Højlund. That's all noise at the moment. We've signed Mason Mount. But if you believe that we're going to sign Onana and Højlund very soon, then they're going about their business and signing players. They don't do that if they're going to go. Either they're not going to go, or they do have an agreement in place that's been sorted out for a while, and it's other people sanctioning these moves, because there's no way they're continuing to operate as a proper invested owner. Fair enough, the players were getting a you know, a bargain basement version of what we need, bar Onana. Højlund, I can completely see the benefit of, by the way, but he's not a catalyst. He's not a game changer. He's a player that I would absolutely want, but we need someone else as well as. Onana's a really good goalkeeper. Mason Mount's neither here nor there. These are not inspired, oh my God, signings. So it's a Glazer summer. It's Glazer-nomics, the usual stuff. But nonetheless, they are spending money. That doesn't tell me they're going to leave the club. So to bring it back to Ferguson, now would be a really, really good time, Wizard, to say something. The Wizard, as we always used to call him. We will see. Hope you enjoyed that. Bit of an opinion piece. And I hope to be back with you in the next few days with something about a movement or something that's going to give us the news that we want. Thanks if you watched. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you soon. Up the Reds. Glazers out.